right. We are going to cover, so what I'm going to do today is cover the market data update from July, but also compare it to the rest of the country. And I found a lot of what I hope are, cool graphs and charts and, me nerding out type of thing. But I want to offer the perspective of like, here's what our market's doing and how to think about it and how to approach it and in perspective in relation to the national market data that you know really our local people, right, are going to be more in tune to that than they are this, which is unfortunate, but also provides the opportunity that you can capitalize on to give them that information. So for your business individually to take something like this, and this will be recorded and I'll distribute it to you, and make your own content out of it to then distribute and market with and inform with at minimum is a really powerful aspect for your business. So I'll dive in. Anybody has questions, feel free to chime in. But what we're going to look at first here is this is just Monroe County single family only data from July of 2025. And you see on the right here the comparison to last month in June. And then on the left, you see the comparison to July of 2024. And what to look at with this data would be the points of, okay, pricing is still increasing year over year. At 7% for these again single family homes in Monroe County. Compared to last June, it went down a little bit, from down 4%. Keep in mind seasonality, as we discussed, really runs the peak season runs through July, and then we typically see the downturn. So that makes sense to see that. Closed sales were up from June, which is good seasonality wise, but we're down almost 5% from last year, which reflects that notion of just, we're not coming out of this bottom of the barrel transaction count type of market. So to still see a reduced number of closed sales compared to the year prior, we in order to feel good about the market improving from a transaction count standpoint, from a unit count standpoint, we'd look to see some year over year growth. Still 7 days on market on it, median for listings. Still hovering around that 120% list to sale price ratio, even though it's gone down slightly. Strong indicators of a seller's market still, right? Along with the pricing increase, and you see, how it's playing out price per square foot. The inventory data is where it really gets interesting this month, and ultimately we'll spend a lot of time, kind of focusing on here. As I've shared with everybody before, the local demand data, in terms of from showing time and the showing activity that we've been tracking, has been reduced, has been regressing, has been going down. Now that again, like we said, peak of the market type of stuff that starts to play out in a downturn after the 4th of July week. That may be reflective of that. It also is maybe reflective of just the overall demand conversation that we've been having really all year in regards to just reduction in demand and friction to demand for a number of reasons out there, economically, politically, whatever. But on the supply side of the conversation, here's what it looks like for Monroe County with single family homes. Another big jump in new listing inventory from last year at 18%, but down from last month. So, again, that peak of the market type of stuff and the seasonality stuff. The biggest key point from the data this month is this active inventory statistic. And to see that we are growing in the homes that remain on the market, both month over month and year over year. That's the thing to follow, right? Is that if our active inventory of what doesn't sell continues to grow at this type of clip of double-digit percentage growth, right? Plus, combined with reduction in demand, that alone, just in theory, right, of like increased supply and reduced demand, that's the recipe for a shift. It, I guess, to make a long story short and give you my take on things, I don't know if this is like the shift, and I'm gonna show a lot of stuff to show you perspective of what the shift looks like in the rest of the country and other markets that truly have balanced or shifted. My thing is like, I don't know if that's happening to us right now, as we speak, or if this is seasonality playing out. And the reason that I can be, like, I guess it's wishy-washy, right? Because on one hand, I'm saying, hey, this recipe on the inventory side combined with the demand side would if that continues, all signs point to a shift. What contradicts that is this month supply of inventory statistic being at 0.9 is just so extreme for an indicator of the market, and it being out of balance, which 4 month supply is the old adage of what a balanced market would be, and we're so far off that it's just
Can I
I
chime in really quick?
please.
Um, I totally get what you're saying, but that's increasing. Like at one point that was like point 0.4. Now it's point
Yeah.
0.9. I
Yep.
just did a report for one of my listings. I think it was RPR, and that states that we have like 1.1. Now, granted, I don't know where they got that information from or how current
Yeah.
it is, but like, do you think that that's like climbing slowly?
Well, it's showing that this data shows that it is, and I just jumped ahead. Like we'll look at a 6 county region next for all the entire area and
Yes.
all
Yeah.
properties, and that's at 1.4, right?
Okay.
But to go
Yeah.
back and focus to single family in Monroe County, which
Monroe County. Yep.
most of our bread and butter, right? Yeah, I mean we're up 20%, right? Which to me your point is valid, Lorraine. And to me, it shows more so just like how extreme we've been, right? To where we're getting a 20% increase year over year and we're still below a month is just obnoxious. Now, how I feel about that 4 month indicator of the balanced market at a national level with our market conditions, we're probably more like 2 months would be balanced, at least the feel of it. So I think we're very much like it's new economic formulas that could be at play moving forward, based on how extreme our market has been and what's to come from here. Like we'll probably feel balanced when this number goes from zero point 0.9 to 2 months, or maybe 2.5. I would argue certainly 3, because if you can, like let's do this. Picture or just, imagine what you're feeling out there, pulse of the market right now, and just everything that's playing out with your business and the people that you're helping, and that's at this level of around a month's supply of inventory. Now double it, now triple it, right? And imagine how it plays out. So I don't think we need to get to 4 months to be balanced like the old formula would indicate. I think we're going to feel it a lot. Like we're going to feel when this goes from zero point 0.9 to 1.5. We're going to feel when it goes from 1.5 to 2 months. I also think there's like an if, I mean, no, I shouldn't say that. Like markets operate on cycles, all it has to cycle at some point. It's just a matter of like how. and when, and how different is the result from what a old textbook adage would be. Does that make sense? Looking at the same data, expanding, just to go more broad for our local market and take the 6 county region that we operate in and looking at all property types, similar results, right? Still, actually more 10% increase in pricing. Closed sales down. What was it? Yeah, it's doubled up, down 9.6% compared to 5 in Monroe County. You got, 8 days on market, which is still crazy. 115% list to sales price ratio, which is still crazy for sellers market. And a little less extreme on the active inventory data that we mentioned being left over. It's only up 1.8% compared to last year. Um, and again, that month's supply of inventory for the entire market here locally being a little higher at 1.4, but just understand that that's very extreme, very extreme. I want to show some national comparisons now. So I got a bunch of stuff I'm going to fly through, and anybody wants to stop on any of them, please do. But to take that data for our local market and now look at like what's happening nationally, I think this is all with the intention of giving you the perspective to then be able to inform your people with the same perspective. But the first thing we're looking at here is um, active listings, right? So those listings remaining on the market, and this green line is 2025, blue 24, red down to 2022. So you see how much different it is nationally, right? Compare, 2022 where kind of when that crazy COVID era market ended, right? And what the inventory level is like compared to how much higher it is nationally this year. Now we have similar type jumps, right? We're just again that month supply, which you'll see here. There's just not enough inventory, even though it's increasing to fuel all the demand. Here's the month supply chart, right? And just, nationally 2022, they were started at 1.5 and this time nationally it was 2 point or almost 3, right? And now nationally, we're they're 4, 5, right now right at 4. So you see the difference in national market on this key data point compared to us. And this really should tell a lot of what information you need to explain the difference between the national market and all the headlines that it's receiving compared to our local market. But you also see kind of the trend here from 2022 and the changing market that it's been, right? See this level of 22, this level of 23, it just keeps bumping up. Median days on market nationally right now is at 40. 2022 nationally, it was at about low 20s, mid 20s. And, again, perspective, we're still at 7. And the pulse out there is everybody loses their mind when something goes delayed past the delayed negotiations and there's not a bidding war and it takes 30 days to sell a house. Like that's an extreme scenario for our market to take 30 days at this point. Like you can pretty safely indicate that, something's going on with that property, whether it be price condition or a factor that's really going to provide friction to its selling versus like the national market, for our, we're saying like, hey, we need about a week, 10 days, 2 weeks tops to know what the market's gonna tell us. Versus nationally, you're going into that with, hey, we're gonna need about 40 days to know where we stand. So perspective for an agent, like we got it pretty good. Even though times are changing is the feel and we have to account for more of these longer days on market type of listing strategies. but we're not at 40. We're not at, 55 back in the, before the spring market started nationally. So have that perspective. List to sale price ratio. Again, just describing how extreme our market has been, right? We're still at around 115, 120%. In 2022, when this all when it really started to cool down nationally, was coming off a peak of 102%, right? And right now it's settled into where nationally, you're lucky to get close to 100% of your list sale price, or of your list price. 98.9% is the current list to sale price ratio for the country. And we're at 119. So again, just perspective to compare to. Pending sales data, you just see the decline in the number of homes sold, right? From 22 at when the peak of that crazy 6 million homes sold era that was, the COVID era, so to speak, declined and just the continual decline from there. And you see this green line, like currently we're below, a trend to grow for the year. A few months ago, we were slightly above it, but these last 3 years are really just kind of neck and neck with bottom of the barrel type of numbers. And right now we're down. We'll see how the rest of the year plays out. Here's a demand index, again nationally, but again coming off the peak, right? So like this is what February, probably right about here is when the interest rates jumped, because then you see that steep decline. But this, the level of demand, just baseline is 100. Back then, coming off the COVID era, was at 175, and now we're at back to the baseline of 100. So that's how much the demand has reduced over the last 3 years. And it's, not really, you're not seeing upward trends to it for a number of reasons, right? Interest rates, you know, economic uncertainty, etc. All right. Inventory comparisons. This shows where we're at now compared to pre-pandemic levels. And you just see how, we're not the highest with what's that, Illinois at you know, six minus 63% of a dip compared, so inventory now compared to what it was prior to COVID. We're 40% below the inventory levels. And you see what the Northeast is doing overall compared to the rest of the country, right? Like, Texas, 32% more inventory compared to what it was prior to the peak of the market in 2020, 2021. So just to give perspective of this Northeast territory, is still a strong market compared to, you got a quarter of the country in that kind of territory, and then 3/4 of it, outside of it, in some extreme numbers here in certain states. This shows price changes across the country, in terms of price growth. Just to give kind of a similar map comparison perspective, right? Where Rochester's pointed out here, it's seen really good growth at 3.7% year over year from last year to 2020 till now. And you see the Florida markets with minus 12%, minus 10%. You see just there's a lot of the blues would be growing, right? And again, pretty secluded to the Northeast for the most part. And then you get into the red, orangish shades of negative growth or just flat growth in a lot of other territories in the country. So, we're in, it's not us and only us in this type of market condition, but just to give perspective as to what the rest of the country looks like. This is the predictions for now till next year. And you see, Rochester's still predicted to grow, but now we've got like very, very few red bubbles, or I'm sorry, blue bubbles indicating growth compared to stagnant or reductions in a lot of, most of the rest of the country. So we've got this like positive outlook market ahead of us. Uh, this is a price reductions, map, like listings, the percentage of listings that have seen price reductions. And we're actually the lowest in all the markets selected. Dark red was single digit percentage of homes of listings that have a price reduction in our market. Now, I think our pulse of things right now would lead to an expectation that that increases marginally, maybe, or a lot. But, again, comparatively speaking, when we're looking to go from single digit number of listings price with a price reduction to 10% or 12% compared to, 30+% in most of the rest of the market. And I believe the national average, this is a little old at May, but I believe right now, nationally, on average, it's about 39 or 40%. I think I heard recently of listings that get a price reduction. And we're, you know, panicked about single digit percentage. So again, perspective. All right, I want to get into now. Any questions on that national conversation? Because I got some back to some Rochester um, data points.
Nope.
All right, this shows rent averages, and you see from 2016 till now what rent has done in our market, and then this chart here shows just the year over year growth, right? And you see what happened in the pandemic time where it's just everything was increasing, right? And that translated to rent as well. It's since calmed down, but rents are still going up. And frankly, they're going up at a higher rate, even though it's not double digit percentage like it was when it was extreme, but rent is still increasing more than it was prior to the pandemic. So the notion that, our affordable market in general, I'm going to show you something to show that it still is. But the notion that, it's not like rent's getting any cheaper. So you're just contributing even more equity to your landlord versus you as a homeowner if you're choosing to rent. This is some housing affordability data for our market, specifically in Rochester. I got this from NAR. And these numbers here are extremely favorable for the overall grand scheme of things, to where, price to income ratio at that low and payment to income ratio this low at 18%, like, general rule of thumb around 30% is where, you know, you want to be at a higher level, right? And we're significantly below that. Now, this takes our market as a whole, so it's just not going to apply to everybody, right? In terms of income that they're earning compared to what housing payments are. But this is good to know. Good to know that, qualifying income to purchase in our market, $73,000. Um, what's the share of income? So like share of income spent on housing. And again, 77% for owners in our market, it's less than 30%, which is amazing and something that we need to understand in terms of, how opportunistic our market is. Because in other markets, this is not that high. And that's a kind of baseline like fundamental financial indicator of things, to where you do not want to have more than 30% of your income tied up in your housing payments. So 3/4 of the homeowners have the benefit of being in that category where they're not overstretched in theory. For renters, little different. So again, back to that opportunity to where it's like renting versus buying, even in, quote unquote, high cost type of times, like it seems right now with higher interest rates, high pricing, there's still plenty of opportunity. This shows share of households and renters who can afford to purchase a median price home. Um, by age group, sorry. And you just, kind of see how the demographics age wise plays out, right? You know, I mean, I was interested to see that, 25 and under, 35% of those kids actually can afford to buy a home. Then it increases from there. Where 25 to 34, you got age group, you have 58%, got your sweet spot of, 35 to 44 at 67%. And then, it starts to kind of decline from there. Blend on this note, we're all rooting for lower interest rates, right? And I wanted to give some perspective as to what that actually does for the local economy here in Rochester. At a 7% mortgage rate, 243,000 households, can afford to buy a medium priced home, which 300,000. At 6%, of course, it increases to 268,000 households. But it's not like 7 to 6% created this to go from 240 to a million. So I just want to offer the perspective of like, like this is helpful to get that reduction, but it's not like it's just the floodgates open and there's an influx of buyers coming from out of the woodwork. So, there's only an increase of about 10% more buyers that can enter the market. Which I guess it's unfair to say only because that's it's a good chunk. But I just want to offer the perspective of like what we're rooting for, of things to I guess we're really rooting for things to accelerate past rates getting to 6% at the end of 2026. However, if you're rooting for that, there's probably something else going on that could cause, pain elsewhere, right? To lower interest rates further or faster than what's planned right now would require some sort of event, whether economically or, just globally. And that becomes dangerous, right? But, you know, keep in mind that 6% level is predicted to be reached at the end of 2026. So like if you're gonna wait that much longer for only an increase like this of demand to come, to the table, I don't like it. And this just kind of sums up, what I just said. You got 25,000 more households, um, when rates do drop. 10% of those households typically buy a home. So question becomes like, do you need 2,500 more real estate transactions in the market to play out? So 2,500 more transactions from what there is existing right now. Do you need that to happen to reach your goals? Like a lot of this comes down to a conversation of like, there's plenty out there for everybody to reach their goals. Waiting for rates to drop as a catalyst to you reaching your goals, it's not necessary. What I got? I think the, again, the ability to take an understanding of this data and turn it into perspective to offer information and perspective to your people and value to your people becomes key. You want to stay in touch, like this is the stuff you can stay in touch with. Just checking in with data on the local market compared to just checking in with how you're doing is a big difference of value provided as a professional.